Winter had wrapped the small town of Willowbrook in a thick, soft blanket of white. Snow rested gently on every rooftop. Tree branches bent gracefully under its weight, and the streets shimmered under long strings of golden lights. December was always a beautiful time of year here. But Christmas made it magical. Every year, the townspeople of Willowbrook decorated their homes with loving care. Windows glowed with the warm flicker of candles. Festive wreaths hung on every door, and the gentle sound of church bells echoed softly through the crisp, cold air. It was a picture-perfect scene. Yet, behind all that beauty, many hearts carried quiet worries, unspoken sadness, and long-forgotten dreams. At the very edge of town, there stood an old house. Its paint was peeling, and it had a crooked chimney that leaned just a little to one side. This was the home of Mr. Elias Turner, a man most people in town barely noticed. Ewaskit always kept to himself, and walked slowly with the help of a wooden cane. Ever since his wife had passed away 5 years ago, Christmas had lost all of its meaning for him. Inside his house, the air was cold and still. Elias hadn't bothered to decorate at all. There was no tree standing in the corner, no lights twinkling in the windows, and no music playing on the radio. There was just silence and memories. He sat near the window, his gaze fixed on the children playing outside in the fresh snow. Their laughter, light and carefree, carried on the wind and reminded him of another time when his own daughter, Clara, used to build snowmen right there in that very yard. She had moved far away years ago, and life, as it often does, had slowly pulled them apart. The letters they exchanged became rare, and then the calls stopped altogether. Elias would tell himself that she was just busy with her own life, but deep down the truth of their distance hurt more than he could ever admit. On the afternoon of Christmas Eve, the snow began to fall harder, the flakes growing larger and more determined. Elias wrapped his worn coat tighter around his frail shoulders and stepped outside to fetch more firewood. The cold bit at his cheeks instantly. As he crossed the yard, his boots crunching in the deep snow, he heard a faint cry. It was barely a whisper against the wind. "Hello." "Hello, Ekayid," out his voice raspy from disuse. He scanned the yard, his eyes squinting against the swirling snow. Near the old oak tree, its bare branches reaching like skeletal fingers towards the gray sky, he saw a small figure collapsed in a heap. It was a boy, no older than 10, shivering and pale against the white landscape. Elias rushed over as fast as his legs would carry him. "Child, what are you doing out here?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "My name is Noah," the boy whispered, his teeth chattering. I got lost." Without a second thought, Elias carefully lifted the small boy into his arms and carried him back inside the cold house. He immediately went to the fireplace, his old hands skillfully lighting a fire that soon crackled to life, casting dancing shadows on the walls. He wrapped the boy in the thickest blankets he could find and hurried to the kitchen to make a pot of hot soup. As the warmth from the fire and the soup returned to Noah's face, Elias felt something stirred deep inside his own chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. It was a flicker of purpose, of connection. "Do you have family?" Elias asked gently. Once Noah had stopped shivering. "My mom works at the hospital tonight," Noah explained, his voice a little stronger now. "She's a nurse. I was supposed to stay with a neighbor, but I ran away. I wanted to find a Christmas miracle." A sad smile touched Elias's lips. "Miracles don't always come the way we expect them to," he said softly, more to himself than to the boy. As evening fell and darkness settled over Willowbrook, the church bells began to ring in the distance, their chimes carrying through the snowy night. Noah's eyes, which had been heavy with exhaustion, suddenly lit up.
"Can we go?"
he asked, his voice filled with a child's pure hope. "Please." Elias hesitated. He hadn't stepped foot inside that church since his wife's funeral. The memories were too painful. But looking at Noah's hopeful, upturned face, something inside him shifted. That small, persistent flicker of feeling was growing brighter. He nodded. The church was filled with people, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candlelight against the ancient stone walls. The air was warm and thick with the scent of pine and melting wax. The choir sang softly, their voices rising in harmonies that seemed to fill every empty space in Elias's heart. The warmth inside the church felt different from the fires heat it, felt real, and it reached a place that had been cold for a very long time. During the service, the pastor spoke about hope, about forgiveness, and about finding light even in the darkest of winters. His words seemed to be meant just for Elias. He felt tears well in his eyes as he realized just how long he had been living in the shadows of his past, lost in his own private winter. And then, something unbelievable happened. As the final hymn began to play, the heavy wooden doors of the church swung open. A woman stepped inside, snow clinging to her coat and hair, her breath misting in the cold air she'd brought in with her. Elias froze. He couldn't breathe. He knew that face, even after all these years. "Clara," he whispered, the name a ghost on his lips. Clara scanned the crowded room, her expression nervous and unsure until her eyes met her father's. In that instant, time seemed to stop. The music, the crowd, the candlelit it all faded away. "Dad?" She breathed out. They stood there for a moment, just staring at each other across the aisle, before rushing forward and embracing in a tight, desperate hug. Years of distance, of silence, of unspoken words, all dissolved in that single, powerful moment. "I'm sorry," Clara cried, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I should have come sooner." "I'm just glad you're here," Elias replied, his own tears finally falling freely. "I'm just so glad you're here now." Noah watched them from the pew, a quiet, knowing smile on his face. After the service, back at Elias's house, Clara explained everything. Her return to Willowbrook had been unexpected. She was a nurse now, just like Noah's mother, and had recently taken a job at the local hospital. She had come looking for a father, filled with regret and a desire to reconnect. When she had seen Noah at the hospital earlier that day, a young boy who'd run away, she realized he was her patient's son. Everything had connected like small, scattered pieces of a puzzle being guided into place by the gentle hand of Christmas itself. That night, for the first time in 5 years, Elias's old house glowed brighter than any other on the street. A small tree, found and brought in by Clara, stood by the window, decorated with simple, handmade ornaments they crafted together. Laughter, real and joyful, filled the once silent rooms. Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, as if it were blessing the reunion within. Elias looked at his daughter, at the cheerful fire, at the sleeping boy on his couch, and he finally understood. Christmas wasn't about the grand decorations or the expensive gifts. It was about second chances. It was about the unexpected kindness of a stranger. It was about having the courage to open your heart again, even after it has been broken. As the clock on the mantelpiece neared midnight, Elias whispered to himself, This is my miracle." And in that moment, it seemed that the lights of Willowbrook shone just a little brighter that Christmas Eve. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing for more tales of hope and wonder. Merry Christmas to all of you.